Hey guys, it's Jenny Silver. Many are receiving overpayment notices from the California EDD, so I have spoken with Asaf Liktosh from Pershing Square Law Firm about some important things to know about overpayment notices, overpayment appeals, and overpayment waivers. This video is sponsored by Pershing Square Law Firm. Pershing Square Law Firm is California's first and only law firm dedicated to EDD law. They represent clients in appealing any kind of adverse decision made by the EDD. Whether it is a denial of benefits, overpayments, procedural, or computational issues with your claim, they represent claimants undergoing any of these issues. In the 8 years they have been in business, they have maintained an A-plus rating and accreditation from the Better Business Bureau. They offer a flat rate fee and do not operate on percentages, so claimants keep almost all of their benefits. Pershing Square Law Firm understands that their clients are undergoing financial hardship and therefore their pricing is intended to be very accessible to most people, even those undergoing such financial hardship. Lastly, they offer a complimentary consultation, and anyone facing legal issues with the EDD can call into Pershing Square Law Firm and receive helpful information and get questions answered directly from an attorney through a free consultation. Click on the link in the video description in order to contact Pershing Square Law Firm.
Up until the end of December, you didn't have to prove self-employment. So people file their claims thinking it's okay, and they never ask anybody to show their self-employment. So I think people were kind of gaslighted into a trap where now they're in this claim and they're collecting money and they're depending on it. And then the law changed and nobody knows about it. And eventually they say, oh, actually, we do want you to show that you were self-employed. And by the way, what we consider self-employed might not be what you're actually doing. So you're going to end up with a debt of $30,000. And we're talking about people who have just gotten back on their feet after this pandemic. The people who end up with those overpayments are not the ones who have strong businesses who received probably nice, hefty PPP loans or disaster loans. These are the people who are literally at the bottom of that financial totem pole. Those are the people who do the gig work and are starting off their careers, and so they're the ones who get hurt the most by this ineptitude by the ADD. And it's
Yeah.
crazy,
And
it's
it's not
sad.
going to just go away. The fees and the interest will compound. It's a huge problem. Um,
Yes, that's why, Ginny, I really have to reiterate again. Okay, it's so important that this is the moment that those people have to act. They have to use this opportunity. Don't just say, oh, it's the government. Forget about it. I'll just, disappear and they'll never hear from me again. Don't say those things because you're just going to make your problem so much more difficult to fix. This is the moment to confront this, fight it, and reverse it and mitigate it to the best of your ability. You might not be able to get rid of all of it, but you can get rid of some of it and just put this problem in its place.
People, when someone first receives an overpayment notice, what sort of time frames do they need to keep in mind? Because I know that it's time sensitive. What should be their first series of actions with that?
Okay, so usually when you're overpaid, it may be preceded with a notice of proposed overpayment, meaning the EDD is letting you know that they're considering to find an overpayment against you. And the letter briefly explains why, and it gives you a chance to respond. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But what I would suggest is, first of all, try to exhaust this opportunity to get rid of the overpayment and nip it in the bud. If you can't, you'll get a notice of overpayment and a notice of determination, 2 letters. Both of them are appealable. The notice of determination explains the reason that you are overpaid, and the notice of overpayment sort of lists out all the weeks that you have been overpaid and the total amount, and it will also determine or show you if you have a penalty. There are 2 kinds of penalties. There's a 30% penalty of the principal amount, and there's a certain number of weeks that you're going to be disqualified to receive benefits in the future. They usually run somewhere from 15 to something much higher. Sometimes they give less than 15, but recently I've noticed they've become more punitive. And I think they've lost their tolerance to people not reporting things correctly, and they just attribute everything to fraud. So we're seeing those 15-week disqualifications everywhere nowadays. So the first thing you want to do is you have 30 days to file an appeal, and you have to appeal both those documents. That's critical because if you appeal just one, you'll get a hearing for the overpayment, but you won't get a
Oh.
hearing for the issue that
Oh,
caused you to be
wow.
overpaid.
Okay. That's something I didn't realize that both documents had to be appealed separately through separate paperwork. It's not all connected.
It should be, and sometimes it does go through as an appeal for both issues,
Mm.
but not always. And then why take the risk? Because if you file one appeal and then you get weeks or months later a notice of hearing just for one issue, not for
Mhm.
the second issue, you'll file a late appeal for the second issue, and then you're putting your case at risk because it's late for no reason. So all you have to do is just file two appeals,
Yeah,
right?
that's very good
Uh,
information.
Yes, it's critical. And then once you get a hearing date for those, you will have about 10 days to prepare your case. That means you have to prepare whatever documentation you have. If you have any witnesses that you want to bring into the hearing, uh, I would say do some research on the judge. There's not a lot of information about them out there. We happen to know judges. I think it's really critical to understand who your judge is because, not all judges are the same and they are your target audience. And some of them are a little more conservative. Some of them tend to understand things more quickly. Others understand, things not as fast, and you have to explain things in multiple ways to them or try to make them clear through your testimony. All these things have to be prepared for. And there are also a lot of new judges out there because they're trying to meet the demand for hearings. So there's a few curveballs on the way to a hearing that you have to take into consideration. One tip that I have for people who are considering going to a hearing for an overpayment is, prepare yourself to be taken a little bit off guard with the questions that you're going to receive. Not everything this is not scripted. This is very much kind of, like an improv type of thing where you really have to roll with the punches. And sometimes that means understanding what the law is, coming in with a clear plan and a strategy, coming prepared with the documents that you need, knowing exactly what message you want to get across to the judge, and trying to figure out what is the best way to get the message across, given who the judge is. There is one other thing to remember is that when you have an overpayment as a result of a termination or a voluntary quit, your employer will probably be at the hearing. So you're going to get some pushback at the hearing. That's, kind of an unpleasant position for people to be in sometimes, that they have to confront their employers or meet their boss. Maybe things didn't end on the best note when you left the work, and you have to prepare yourself for that. You have to be prepared to be cross-examined by the employer and cross-examine them. Sometimes the cross-examination is the most important part because if you were terminated from a job, it's the burden of the employer to show that you were terminated for misconduct. And if they bring not just the HR, but they bring your coworker and your direct supervisor to come and testify, people who actually know about what happened, they might be able to push the burden over to you. And your only way to sort of beat that is by cross-examining them. You do, in some cases, have to have, I think, good representation to be ready for all of that and to be able to put up a fight against an employer that is trying to push back against your benefits. You just never know what's going to happen.
Some may be able to seek an overpayment waiver if they're issued a notice of overpayment and they want to have that waived because they feel that perhaps it was an unjust decision, perhaps it causes severe financial hardship. The EDD has provided very limited information on this overpayment waiver. There is one line in the overpayment notice, very small, that references it, and that's about it. The EDD contact that I have has not elaborated on this at all. They have told me more information is coming for the last 6 months. What can you tell us about obtaining an overpayment waiver?
So I'm really glad we're talking about this because this is such an important point. The waiver is really claimant's last line of defense when it comes to stopping an overpayment from plaguing their lives for many, many years, especially if the amount of money they have to pay back is tens of thousands of dollars. Hopefully you have other ways to address an overpayment before you get to a waiver. What I want people to understand is that a waiver is not a free pass to just collect benefits and get a waiver from a judge because it's COVID and everyone understands that it's hard. That's not how it works. You have to be very careful. And when you go ask a judge for a waiver, you have to be very prepared. A waiver has a number of elements to it. There's a threshold element, which is fault. People misunderstand fault for, some kind of bad intent. Fault is actually any action that you took that put into motion the payment to you of benefits you're not entitled to receive, meaning you did or didn't do something that caused the EDD to pay you benefits you weren't supposed to receive. That's a very, very low threshold. And I suspect a lot of people are going to not be able to overcome that threshold, or at least might do something in the hearing or say something in the hearing that would cause them to misrepresent what was going on. They try to convince the judge that they weren't trying to steal money, but that's not the standard, and they're going to end up with fault, and the judge won't be even able to consider waiver. The second one is financial hardship. Again, financial hardship, it's not as simple as it sounds. You have to demonstrate that it would be against good conscience and equity for you to have to pay back that money. And there's a direct relationship between the amount of money that you owe and the judge will conduct an inquiry into your finances. So there's a direct relationship between the money you owe and your finances. And a lot of lines are going to be drawn. Very important to remember that your appeal hearing is the only opportunity you're going to get to have a judge consider your waiver. The EDD, when they consider you for a waiver, they don't talk to you, they don't inquire about your finances, they don't really do anything except for look at your file and decide whether you should get a waiver or not. I've seen a lot of people where it was obvious they should get a waiver and the EDD still decided not to give it to them. So really the only time you get a fair shot at a waiver is at the hearing. So handle this with care. Handle this with a lot of consideration and thought, because if you just waltz into it, you're going to end up with $20,000, $30,000 in debt with a 10% annual interest, with the EDD, which quite honestly collects money like a shark lender. And there's not going to be any way out of it, I'm afraid to say. So really handle with caution and just understand that it's better to try to reverse overpayment on the merits, meaning to show that you were in fact self-employed, or that you did leave your job for a good reason, and the law does qualify you to receive benefits, before you go to the waiver option, because that's really the last hurrah before you end up with.
So let me know the order. Should you first appeal the decision and then apply for an overpayment waiver if that does not go through, or what's the best process here if someone is trying to go through that overpayment process?
So those things usually go together. You file an appeal and you get a chance to make your argument for eligibility and also make your argument for waiver. But what I'm trying to say is don't go into the hearing just asking for waiver. You have to use every tool that you have in your toolbox to fight the overpayment. And the first tool that you have in your toolbox is to argue that you are eligible. You're overpaid right now because the EDD determined retroactively that you're not eligible. So fight that first. Then fallback would be a waiver. The reason is because you have much less control over the waiver because the thresholds are so low just to be able to meet it. And you can control the facts that already happened in the past. If the record shows that you entered incorrect information about your wages, right? Or the record shows something else about why you have an overpayment and you caused that, although you caused it unintentionally, you're not going to be eligible for waiver. And we're talking about people who have just gotten back on their feet after this pandemic. The people who end up with those overpayments are not the ones who have strong businesses who received probably nice, hefty PPP loans or disaster loans. These are the people who are literally at the bottom of that financial totem pole. Those are the people who do the gig work and are starting off their careers. And so they're the ones who get hurt the most by this ineptitude by the EDD. And it's crazy.
And it's
sad.
not going to just go away. The fees and the interest will compound. It's a huge problem.
Yes, that's why, Jeannie, I really have to reiterate again, okay? It's so important that this is the moment that those people have to act. They have to use this opportunity. Don't just say, oh, it's the government, forget about it. I'll just, disappear and they'll never hear from me again. Don't say those things, because you're just going to make your problem so much more difficult to fix. This is the moment to confront this, fight it, and reverse it and mitigate it to the best of your ability. You might not be able to get rid of all of it, but you can get rid of some of it and just put this problem in its